Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of OPE. We are the Ohana Packers Edition podcast. I am Iowa Joe. As you can see, neither one of these guys is Mike Kawano. Kawano is still in Japan doing family stuff there. So hopefully next week, I believe he is back with us. But this week, I do have guests. I don't know if they're honorable guests or not. I know Jacob sure isn't, but maybe Joey anyway. But we got Joey Van Zummeren and Jacob Westendorf, both with Bill Huber's Packers
Hell yeah.
Central.
It's the first time I've talked to Joey since that happened.
Yeah.
I'm feeling kind of outnumbered here. When I originally scheduled everything, I thought I was going to be outnumbered with Michigan guys. So I was going to bring in Joey to kind of counterbalance things, and now I'm being outnumbered by Bill Huber guys. So, fellas, how we doing tonight?
I'm doing great. You mentioned being outnumbered by possibly Michigan guys, and now we do just Bill Huber guys. But I mean, also you're still being outnumbered by like guys whose schools most recently defeated or beat Ohio State. So there's that for you too. But yeah, I'm glad to be on here and excited to talk about these cornerback prospects.
Oh, that Missouri game was awesome. It was so depressing for the Buckeyes, and it was hilarious.
Well, at least we don't have Kotnick on here to whine about that one. So, I'm okay with being hit on for Iowa stuff just because, it just, their football.
It's Caitlin Clark time, baby. They're going to win a whole other championship. So we're good.
Yeah. And then I just saw one of the pitchers on the softball team threw a no-hitter the other night. So, softball is even going to be doing something this year. So, it is getting that time of year of the baseball and the softball type stuff. And that's my area. I don't do the basketball and the March Madness and the stuff like that. But, baseball and softball are here. And I know Westendorf's a Yankees fan.
Yeah, they just swept the Astros, man. It was a good weekend.
And Joey, I'm assuming you got that Cardinals blood running through you.
Yeah, I'm a very casual Cardinals fan. I was planning to watch the game tonight, and that would have been the first and one of the only like 3 games I would have watched this year. But yeah, very, very casual St. Louis Cardinals fan.
And see, I'm a Braves fan, so I don't like either one of your teams for obvious reasons.
Hell of the 90s.
So at least we got the most recent World Series win out of the 3 teams. So, I'll count that as a win. But anyway, this is another episode in our draft preview series. This week, we are going to be taking a look at the cornerbacks of this year's draft, which oddly enough, when I was scheduling episodes, I put this a little bit down the list on needs. But then when you actually look at it with the new defensive coordinator, this could be a little bit higher than a few of the other spots. So, I mean, right now we're looking pretty good on the roster on paper. Obviously we've got guys like Jair coming back, and we've got Carrington Valentine, who had a pretty decent year for a 7th round rookie. You've got Eric Stokes, who I personally, and I'll ask you guys this, but I personally think Eric Stokes, if he's healthy, will have a better time in the Hafley defense than what he did in the Joe Barry defense, because with the play style of Stokes, I think his skill set will lend a little bit better to the press coverage than he did with the zone coverage team. So just, to start that off the bat, what do you guys think about the current roster and what we have in this new Hafley defense?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting just the whole conversation that you were kind of hitting on of people's ideas if cornerback is a need for the Packers at all. I definitely think it is. Especially, I mean, what you mentioned about the scheme change will be interesting to watch. I mean, the safety position definitely increased in value, is already a need for the Packers, but then especially with how much Hafley likes to use the safety close to the line of scrimmage and kind of put some creative stuff there, increasing value. But with cornerbacks too, I definitely think it's a need specifically at slot. I really like, obviously, Jair Alexander. I really like Carrington Valentine. In the slot, though, they seem to be more confident in Keyshawn Nixon than I am. From the comments from Matt and Brian at the owners meeting, they were talking as if the signing or the re-signing of Keyshawn Nixon was not only a move because they liked him on kickoffs, but also because they think he could fit really well in Jeff Hafley's defense. So that's interesting to me, but I definitely do think no matter what, you want another cornerback in this year's draft because Keyshawn is still a question mark, even if you're banking on him being better in Hafley's scheme. And then also you just want to build for the future. You don't know exactly what you have in Carrington Valentine. Still definitely need some depth there. You don't know what you have in Eric Stokes, like you're hitting on Joe. So I think it's an interesting position to look at, and especially with the class of this year's cornerback, they could have their picking of the exact guy they want for Jeff Hafley's defense. And the interesting thing is, I feel like we really don't know exactly what Hafley wants, and I think we'll find out a lot about that with their draft selections.
Yeah, and Hafley's he said basically as we build this defense, they're trying to build it around the guys that they have, which that seems so obvious of oh, you should do the things that best suit your players. But a million coaches don't do that. I'm trying to think of who it was. There were defensive coaches that didn't have any use for Aaron Donald when he was being drafted because he was too small for, quote, my system. Well, congratulations. Aaron Donald is in the conversation for greatest defensive player ever. And you now decided you couldn't draft him because he weighed 270 pounds.
I'll be honest, when he was coming out of the draft, I was thinking the same thing. I said he was great, but he was a little small, and I don't know if he'd fit the Packers system for what they needed at that time. So
yeah, and it's hard sometimes because you get players that obviously transcend the system.
Yeah,
there are players that are system proof. But when you talk about the Packers cornerback situation, to me, Eric Stokes, and he was dealing with some injuries, and hopefully he's able to get past those, but he looked like he was running in quicksand against Tampa Bay. And, Mike Evans is older than the three of us put together. And he's still really good. I'm not saying that, but his speed is not what it once was. And Stokes' thing is supposed to be speed and athleticism. Just hasn't, you haven't seen it. And Stokes had that really good rookie season, was not having a good go as a sophomore year. And then last year he had more stints on injured reserve than he did interceptions in his career.
Yeah.
So it's a tough spot. I think that counting on anything from Eric Stokes would be a mistake. Anything you get from him should be a bonus. Carrington Valentine had a better year than I thought he did, just kind of based on, or at least statistically, the numbers say better than what my feelings were, which, feelings are not facts. So I understand that, but there's that. And then Keyshawn Nixon on the other side, I feel like his season was better than what your Pro Football Focus numbers and stuff like that would say, but it's not the position where it's oh, we got Keyshawn Nixon. We don't need to find another nickel corner. So this is a position where I feel like there's some risk involved if they don't add to it. If they just say, hey, it's the guys we've got and maybe a late developmental type in the 6th round again, that's something that you could be asking for trouble. Or, you could be saying at the end of the year, well, they had Alexander who was, awesome and has been and seems to be beyond that weirdo situation from a year ago. And then you've got Stokes, who was a former 1st-round pick, and he found his form and everything was great. And Valentine was a stud in the 7th round, and they were right about Nixon and blah, blah, blah. But I personally would not be – I think cornerback should be in play as soon as the 25th overall pick in this draft. And that – there are even corners that we'll talk about that are on my list of guys I would move up for them to add them to the team.
For sure. And we'll get to our guys here in a minute, but just to kind of continue on what is already current on the roster. So we know there's Jair, we know there's Stokes, there's Nixon and Valentine. They brought back Robert Rochelle. They have Zion Gilbert, Anthony Johnson, and they brought back Corey Ballantyne. Now, Ballantyne is an interesting one because I think he played way above what anybody expected he would last year. He's 6 years in the league already, and he, can we say that he finally figured it out, or was he just, in a situation that could succeed off of it. Obviously, we don't, Zion Gilbert, Anthony Johnson, first-year players that spent most of their time on the practice squad. Could they be something? Sure.
I mean,
Sorry, my phone
yeah.
went off for some reason. I mean, they could be something, but to rely on them is something else. Robert Rochelle, we know, is going to be strictly, most likely, a special teams guy, and that's what they really liked off of him, even though I think he's a former third-round pick.
Yeah, he's got some draft pedigree.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a possibility there, but, again, 4 years in the league out of Central Arkansas, and I think really they'll be looking at him for special team stuff. But I agree with you, Jacob. I think that's been the biggest fight I've been having with people on the old Elon machine lately is, everybody's going, oh, well, offensive tackle. Theoretically, that sounds great. But when you look at the Packers' history at the position, they've taken, 2 offensive tackles in the first round since 2010?
Yeah, and they took them in back-to-back years.
Yeah. And, they're 50-50 on it right now. Obviously Bulaga came in, had a solid career with the Packers, and then unfortunately what happened to Derek Sherrod was a freak injury that just, it really hurt him in more ways than one, but, they liked what they saw out of him. A lot of people liked what they saw out of him until, he got that freak leg injury where I think they even said he almost lost his leg. So, I mean, just to even come back to be able to play football after that. But I digress. Their bread and butter has always been the mid-round, blue-collar type of offensive linemen. They've had some of the best offensive linemen they've drafted in the mid-rounds. So, for people to say offensive tackle in the first round, you've got to hope that is going to be a cornerstone making guy to take that in the first round for the Green Bay Packers. Because I know this is a big argument I've been saying for it, and I'm getting to my point here in a minute. You don't take projects in the first round where, oh, well, he's an offensive tackle, but, most likely he's going to kick inside the guard or center. Or, anything like that. And you don't take somebody who's, super raw that you're hoping will come out. But with the deep class that the cornerback kind of has, you're still going to have first-round quality cornerbacks at that point that you can say, all right, we're going to draft him. We're going to, obviously we're going to have Jair as our cornerstone corner. We're going to see what we have in Stokes and Carrington. We can rotate in this first-round guy that is more of a sure shot. And at the end of the season, we'll see where we're at closer for next year. I still think, even though the Packers kind of outplayed their kick coverage this past year, that they could have a down year coming this next year, or they could be super good again next year or this coming year. So it could go either way, but they're still just kind of trying to find their way with it. So I guess my long way around is no OT, just go with the cornerback because it's.
You're wrong. You're wrong. If there's an offensive tackle worth taking, you take him. 100%.
I know it's great. It's Grant Barton.
Not even Barton. Amarius Mims. If Olufashanu falls, there's so many good offensive tackles. And I am sorry, I like Rasheed Walker as much as the next guy. Rasheed Walker is not stopping me from trying to upgrade at that position. You got to ask yourself, yes, for people that don't know, haven't paid attention, whatever, there is a difference between a good offensive lineman and an all-pro one. I promise you there's a difference between those two things. Yes, the Packers, and not only that, the Packers offensive line, I've said this before to push against your argument. If Rasheed Walker is the player that was rotating with Yosh Nijman as late as December 17th last year, and Sean Ryan stinks, and Josh Myers is Josh Myers, you're talking about a bottom third group in the NFL along the offensive line, or maybe just middle of the pack at best. I would have a problem with that. I personally am not ready to just hand the reins to Sean Ryan as the starting right guard. I do not think he played nearly as well as maybe as what has been portrayed by some people or the general assumption. I also push back on the theory of the Packers always draft good linemen later. Under this regime, it's Zach Tom. That is it. The only one you can count, except unless you want to count Rasheed Walker, which I will listen to. But the only one outside of the top 2 rounds that they've hit on is Zach Tom. That's it. Royce Newman.
Are you saying you're not a fan of Cole Murphy from Indiana?
No, I don't even know who that is.
Is from Oregon?
Yeah, no. Simon Stepaniak, Cole Van Lanen. They traded him after like 1 season, and he's not even.
Well, no, he didn't even get a season. They traded him as rookie.
Yeah, Elton Jenkins wasn't a first-round pick. He's been really good. Bakhtiari was a 4th-round pick, but that was a long time ago. Like Sitton, Lang, all these guys that everybody points to, those were all a really long time ago. That was under Ted Thompson. Under Gutekunst, Rasheed Walker, I will give you like half a point for. Zach Tom is a full point, and Elton Jenkins, but Elton Jenkins was a top 50 pick. So, like, is that really a later pick?
Well,
absolutely not.
I have no problems with like the 2nd round, 3rd rounds, and stuff like that. And that's where you usually take the guys that people are talking about where, you know, he's probably going to get drafted at OT, but really he's going to be moved inside to guard because, like Mafi likes to say, he's got short arms or whatever. I don't feel comfortable in the 1st round spending that on a guy that's going to be a project over a guy that's going to be not necessarily a first-year starter, but who...
What makes him a project, though? Like, if Graham Barton, for example, which is kind of the guy you're referring to, what makes Barton a project? He's played guard before. He's played center. He just happens to have played tackle also.
Well, but a lot of people are wanting that guy to be the tackle because of what they're saying, what they're seeing with, like you just said with Rasheed Walker. You know, oh, well, we need somebody for Rasheed. That's great. That's fine. But is Graham going to step in first day and be better than Rasheed?
No, and I wouldn't be drafting him necessarily to play left tackle either. But
that's what a lot of people are saying.
But I think if you're asking somebody to be better than somebody that you have on the team now, the first day that they're a professional football player, like Jordan Love sucked until he didn't. And now we're happy that he didn't,
The arguments that I've been getting into people with is that they want to draft these guys and put them in those spots right away. And
this regime's tried really hard not to do that. Last year being the exception, obviously, but otherwise they try not to play their rookies that much.
And so the argument is they want somebody for left tackle because, like you just said, they already crowned Sean Ryan. Well, I'm not sold on Sean Ryan either. I haven't been sold on Sean Ryan since, you know, he was drafted, and I don't even think I was really sold on him for that. Nick, old podcast host and friend of the show, you know, he was a big fan of his, and coming out of that draft, I was okay with it, but it was whatever. Yeah, we need the guard. Yeah, okay, we need a swing tackle. But people are wanting to do these drafts to fill in the spots that don't necessarily, you don't do it first round. You don't draft a swing tackle in first round.
Well, I don't think he would be drafted to a swing tackle, and I disagree with that notion in general. Can't draft position X in the first round, I think is stupid.
I'm just going by Packer history, my friend.
Which is fine, but I just don't agree. Like, Packer history is also they don't draft off-ball linebackers. They don't draft old people. They don't draft quarterbacks when quarterbacks have 5 years left on their deal. They don't draft safeties in the first round. Well, no, that
one I'll disagree with you because both regimes have been shown that they'll do that. So I would not be surprised if they
around that time frame, I promise you most people are saying they're not taking Jordan Love. So anybody speaking in absolutes about what they will and won't do is wrong.
I never said I wasn't a Sith, my friend. I never said I wasn't a Sith. I'll speak absolutes all the fuck I want.
I think this whole debate,
don't you see these red eyes?
I think this whole debate that you two are having, though, about like positional value, and also, I mean, to your point, Jacob, about like dealing in absolute about the draft. Like, I feel like Packers Twitter, like. And it's probably this way with other fan bases too, but every single year with the draft, I feel like it's the same things of this is definitely not going to happen. And then the Packers stray from their normal behavior. And I think especially like with mock draft culture, I guess I'll call it. Like, people fall in love with the same three prospects. And we are reaching that time of the year where it's just the same three prospects being rotated at the Packers' first pick. Last year was Jackson Smith, Najigba. Lucas Van Ness was getting a little bit in there. And I can't even remember the other guys
Miles
that were
Murphy.
getting. Yeah.
And the
there's
kid
a-
out of ISU went to the Jets. McDonald.
Well, McDonald. Yeah, I mean, pass
Yeah.
rushers and like offensive linemen and Smith and Jigba.
Yeah, and then this year you got I would say Armarius Mims, Cooper DeJean, and Graham Barton. And so I'm in Tyler Guyton in there too. And I just try to like not fall in love with any of those prospects because I just know that Packers aren't going to take them if they are the popular name. But I do think too, like this is just people do kind of have to readjust their mindsets with how the Packers will go at this draft, not only because of the defensive coordinator change, which felt just as much as a scheme change as it did a philosophy change with how the Packers wanted to go about their defense, and also Matt LaFleur to how he wanted to hire his coaches. And I think that will change what kind of traits or measurables they look for in defensive players. And then also just kind of the weird position they're in, because we can look through rose-colored lenses and say the version of the Packers we saw from weeks 9 through the divisional round of the playoffs is the same version that's going to trot out there week 1. But I mean, there's a lot of question marks, and it might not be that ideal world where we see that same thing. And I think Jordan Love is the one player when you can point to and say he showed it enough through those 9 weeks. I mean, that was one of the greatest quarterback stretches I can think of. I haven't watched many seasons because of my youth, but hard to think
Shut
of
up,
many
Joey.
since the 20. Like, I mean, this might be too
Shut
far of a
up.
stretch, but like Aaron Rodgers in 2016 on Run the Table, like as far as high level quarterback play in that amount of time. But like, based on like my whole point would just be like, there's a lot of questions still on this Packers team, and I think you do have to, even though like the offense was expected to go through its growing pains and the team as a whole too, and that we should keep that in mind when viewing this whole season. But we do need to view the whole season as one thing instead of just looking at those last 9 weeks. And especially, I think, with the offensive line, what you mentioned, Jacob, about like Rasheed Walker was being rotated with Josh Nyman, who was a fine rotational guy for a few years, but apparently this year just like lacked
Nobody wanted
effort.
him back.
Yeah,
Nobody wanted him back. Like, I feel like that's
A year
not.
ago-
You're getting to it. That's not being talked about enough. Like, nobody wanted Nyman back. That's the dude.
I
Walker
knew he was going to be
rotating with.
gone after last year when they paid him the 1 year, whatever it was, and he saw like maybe half of the snaps that he saw before.
Well-
But and I get all that stuff you guys are talking. I just and I got to pull this out because it was a solid article. But Joey, you wrote an article for the website about the offensive line and what the Packers track record with it. That yeah, Jacob, you're right. That look at some of the guys that they've taken recently with this regime, but look at what they usually do with it. And last year was the outlier to it, but usually they'll draft 3 guys for the offensive line, ranging from round 2 to 7.
Yep.
And like I said, last year was the outlier, which is really weird considering the kind of depth that last year's class had with offensive linemen. But it's really weird that they didn't take it, being that they were going into a year with uncertainties at positions. So that to me tells me that they felt more comfortable with what they have. This year, yeah, they're going to have to start replacing. Like, do they bring Josh Myers back? I don't think so, but they've done weirder things. Is Zach Tom going to be the right tackle for this foreseeable future? I'd love to see it because I think he's going to be that right tackle that you're going to be able to rely on. But they keep talking about how his position is, center. He's probably going to be a better center than, Gutekunst and LaFleur have both said that he'll probably be a better center than anything else on on the offensive line. So, yeah, they're going to have to replace, but I still think that the first round is still going to go to the defensive side. They're still going to go, whether it's another edge rusher, Jake, and sorry, Jake, I always mess up how do you say your last name, Stanovic. And Mike and I had the conversation, edge is still a need, being, what they've got already. Inside linebacker obviously is still a need, and I did that coverage last week where I don't think there's a first round inside linebacker. I think this is going to be another year like the Manti Te'o year, where the guys that were talked about as possible top round guys are going to be the ones that are going to be taken in the second round. Offensive line always is a need for the Green Bay Packers because that's just what they do. Except for last year, they always tend to take multiple guys on the offensive line. But I really think between safety, corner, and edge, and I know that there's not really a safety to take in the first round unless they do a conversion, that corner and edge seem to be the most likely place that they're going to go in the first round than anything else. And I've never said I'm not wrong. I'll happily say I've been wrong about a lot of shit. And if I were to I would guarantee you this, though. If I were to say, Jacob, I will bet you this, and this, that they don't take an offensive lineman in the first round, the first thing they'll do is run up a card with the first lineman in the first round, because that's just the type of luck I have. But I think that it'll be more corner or edge than anything else, and then they'll go with one of their second rounds will be spent on an offensive lineman, whether it's a center, whether it's a guard, whether whatever. So, suck it.
So we do corners. Let's talk cornerbacks.
Let's talk corners. All right. So I've got my handy dandy notebook here with numerous guys that I've watched. Obviously, one of them that they're expecting me to talk about is Cooper DeJean, but I'm going to refrain from doing Cooper DeJean because I have that bias to him that if you guys want to talk about him, we can talk about him, but I know what my feelings are with him and all that stuff, so we can go off of that. How do you want to do this? You want to do a round robin, or do you just want to start throwing some names out there?
Yeah, send them around. If you want, I can do Cooper.
All right. So, I've got obviously I watch a lot of Iowa football, so I've seen a lot of Cooper DeJean. I know, and I've seen a lot of Iowa defense, so we can talk about him. That's no problem. Joey, you're the man of the hour because you spent a lot of time in Mizzou sports. I know they have a corner down there that a lot of people have talked about. I know he didn't test very well at the combine. If you want to talk about him, you're more than welcome. Or if you got another guy that you'd rather talk about, go ahead and do that one.
I'd love to talk about Ennis Rakestraw Jr. I think the best thing that I can sell Packers fans on is just like, this is a guy you want on your team. And just because of his playing style, and seems kind of cliche and vague, but his effort and attitude. I said on Twitter, I think when you asked about him a few weeks ago, Joe, I said just a complete mindset changer. I really think in a few years he could be just as much as a leader that Jair Alexander is. He is undersized, as you mentioned, but what I was talking about with his attitude and mindset, he is just a very physical guy that thrives in press man coverage. He plays much bigger than his size. He doesn't necessarily jam receivers at the line, but he is very good in kind of tracking those first few steps. Just very sticky in coverage. Also, Packers fans will love the sound of this. He is a willing tackler, so you're not going to get any of those Kevin King shoulder tackles. Would probably play mostly nickel in the NFL. The main concern with him is his size and him not testing well at the combine. That did not help that. He ran around, I think he was a 4.51 at the combine, and then around a 4.4 at the pro day. And so when you're undersized, it's not really great. You want as much going for you as you can in any other department in pre-draft season. And so to not test well at the combine was not great. But I think you just look at the film and, like I said, could be a tone setter for this defense, really an annoying guy to go up in coverage against. So Ennis would make a lot of sense for the Packers at 25, even though he doesn't. I think his RAS is around a 4.5. So that would be outside of their normal thing, but I think he would make sense in every other department, especially with Hafley, who is a press man sicko.
Right now, I got his RAS card pulled up, and he's at a 6.1. I mean, his height's not horrible. It's in the okay range. It's a 5'11". His weight's a little bit under what he's at 183, so he's a little thin. And then 4.51 for 40, 2.59 for 20-yard split, and 1.52 for 10-yard split. Which is 10-yard split is actually in the elite number range. And then he's got a horrible shuttle, and he didn't do the 3-cone or the vert. Now, I could be wrong on this, but didn't they say that he was kind of suffering from like a hammy tweak or something in the knee or ankle?
So, yeah, he has had quite a few injuries at Mizzou, and especially this past season. So, obviously in this pre-draft process, a lot of people have been asking me about him, and I only saw him for 2 or 3 games this season in person at Mizzou. So most of my watching on him was done in the years before. But yeah, so he had a groin injury that he suffered before the Week 4 game against Memphis. And then he suffered a core muscle injury later in the season. I want to say before Week 10 against Tennessee or Florida. But sometime in late season, he had a core muscle injury that kept him out of the rest of the season. And for the Cotton Bowl and for the Senior Bowl, and then he got surgery on that around the time of the Senior Bowl, and then it was a groin that was holding him back in the combine. He tested through that, and he was still, I would assume, kind of dealing with it during his pro day on March 22nd. But I don't think it's any long-term concern. But I mean, he's had a history of leg injuries for sure. He tore his ACL in 2021, I want to say. So definitely notable.
So he's basically first-round Packer material with all the injury concerns.
Exactly. Yeah. Spot on.
I really don't know a ton about him. I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of him. I do know he was a Packer fan favorite there for a bit because pre-combine, because of what you were just talking about, Joey. Yeah, I mean, really his RAS isn't horrible. It sounds like because of the groin injury and that maybe the 4.4 is closer to what his actual speed is more than the 4.51. So that would help. The big thing that I see on him that would kind of scare me a little bit is the 183 for the weight. And being a press man corner at 183, hopefully, that would help that he has a little bit of what I like to call dog in him, where, he's got that fight to him. So as long as the Packers give him a clean bill, and depending on what they trust for numbers, I wish I could see the 3-cone on him. And it is kind of weird that he's got an elite number for his 10-yard split and only good numbers for the 40 and 20. So that makes me think that maybe the injuries were hampering him a little bit at the combine. So I think the pro day numbers would be a little bit closer than that. But Jacob, what do you think about Rackstraw? God, I can't talk.
Rackstraw.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see something I've wondered on what the Packers think, feel, do, whatever, is when they look at these numbers, do they view the nickel position differently than they do cornerback? Because from my money's worth, and I'm just me, I'm an idiot, but I feel like they should, because it's a different thing. When you talk about, shut up, talk about that, like that 10-yard split being elite, that's a big deal because a lot of your nickel coverage stuff is that short area quick game, two-way goes, trying to cover those things where you're quick twitch. That's where I kind of worry about him not doing a 3-cone because that's change of direction type stuff, which is what that, part of the game kind of relies on, taking those drills and relating them to how it's supposed to play out on the field. But I love the swagger. Love the willing tackling ability. That's something where I'm a boomer, man, when it comes to football. To me, it's blocking and tackling is something that you can never have too much of on a team.
I felt old watching a lot of this film too, because it's like, man, why aren't you hitting this guy? Just hit the guy, don't use your arms. Just throw that shoulder into him.
Right. And I get it, because in the NFL, like one of the common complaints from people that watch college and pro is they say, oh, my college team tackles better than my favorite NFL team. And it's like, well, yeah, because in college they can practice tackling. They can't at the NFL level.
Yeah.
They really don't for the most part. So, but I do enjoy that. I think you got to come in with some of that. That willingness is something they're going to need. Hafley's defense is kind of the one thing that we do know for sure is tackling is a requirement, not an option. So they're going to have to do that. I'm interested to see how that affects Jair Alexander. But him being a little bit smaller too is a little worrisome just because when you're a nickel corner, you're a run game defender. And one of the proponents of that outside zone running game or some of these schemes that everybody's got now is they're attacking those smaller defenders and basically saying, can you get off the block of a 300-pound offensive tackle? Probably not, but we're going to make you try. I'm interested. I don't know if he's a first-round pick, especially if you're thinking that he's going to play in the nickel. Mock drafts are just mock drafts, so they are what they are. But, I think he's in the top 60, top 64 in the first 2 rounds. Could the Packers get him at 41? If they do, I'm pretty happy with that. If they're 58, I'm ecstatic. But yeah, he's one of those guys that, like you said, was kind of popular early. Everybody saw his combine testing and basically said, nope. And now I feel like we're kind of doing a full circle of like, well, maybe if we're doing this or that, just trying to figure out how it goes. Yeah, he's a good player.
I will say this. If he was a free agent, then the Packers wouldn't have any problem signing him because they did that just this year with McKinney. He didn't have the greatest RAS score in the world, but yet they just threw all that kind of money at him because he showed that he could play. But the Packers have, per history, have shown that they'd rather take the athletic, the high athletic score and hope that they can teach him to be what they want him to be and then maybe sign a quote unquote non-athletic guy. But I really think again that the RAS score is a little skewed because of the injury. I wish this site would have put his pro day numbers in just as a comparison to see what he did, between the pro day and the combine. But sounds good, Joey. Jacob, hit me with it. Who's the first guy you're going to talk about?
Well, I think I said Cooper DeJean, so that's
right.
what I'm going to.
Let's talk about him.
I think he's more safety than cornerback. A scout told Bill Huber before free agency started that the perfect pairing to fix the Packers' safety issue was Xavier McKinney and Cooper DeJean. I think his ability to do some of the stuff like that. I like him with his eyes on the quarterback. I like his tackling ability, which somebody and I like his ability once the ball's in his hands too. The ball skills. One of the best plays of college football season.
Don't mention it. I don't even want to hear it because it still hurts.
Was Cooper's punt return where it didn't count because they said what was it, Joe? They said he called a fair catch, but the ball bounced.
But he was waving off everybody, and they claimed he was waving fair catch, but his arms never went above his head. It all was
But
flat.
He caught it in the air, right? Like the ball didn't bounce. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, because if they called it after a bounce, that's the same. But yeah, that was one of the best plays of the season. I know the running joke about Iowa's offense. I don't need to make jokes about that, but he was a better part of their offense for a long time.
And they actually used him in some offensive schemes like they've talked about with Nixon with the Packers, that they had him. I believe there was a couple end arounds or something that they sent him on with the ball and he was getting positive yardage out of it. So to go with what you just said, he was an integral part of the offense one way or the other.
Yeah, he was. And I mean, you're joking, but it's true. And I do think there's also, there's something to be said for the way that, like, how hard it is to play defense when the offense isn't going to do anything. Plus, I mean, it wouldn't have changed the outcome of the game, but the game is different in the Big Ten title game if DeJean can play versus when he couldn't. Unfortunately, he's coming off an injury.
Yeah, and I think they came out and said it was a broken bone in the lower leg.
Broken bone in the leg, and he's going to have his pro day workouts and such on April 8th. So that's coming up here pretty quickly. So that'll be cool to have him able to do something like that and just kind of get those numbers and everything out there. But he's a Packer fan favorite, and usually like the Packer favorites, you get these people that like claim they don't like them just to be different, essentially. and I don't think there's any reason to do that. I think, you know, like I said, he's a really good player. He's a willing tackler. I think he's a really good fit in this scheme that Green Bay is theoretically going to employ. It's just a matter of whether or not they're willing to pull the trigger. I don't know if he's going to be available at 25, but if Green Bay is going to get him, it is going to be one of those, it's a first round pick kind of situation.
Joey, I'll let you have your thoughts before I step in and say anything about Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, my main note on him was, I mean, kind of what Jacob mentioned of just like playing with size at the quarterback. Like he just always seems to be one step ahead of what is happening. You know, he's really good at trekking routes, in my opinion, and also, actually, what I was going to say, playing the boundary, he plays that really well. Versatility be interesting. I don't think it's necessarily a situation where like the Packers would try to move him around the whole time, but I think they would either see him playing nickel or safety. And probably safety would be probably more fit for what their needs are. But yeah, I mean, I look like Cooper, and it will be interesting. It feels like he's kind of the one player that's being mocked all over as we go through this draft process, and will be interesting to see kind of how that matches up with the consensus.
So my fan take on Cooper DeJean is you trade up to first pick and take him there. But
I would. Why not?
But leaving my bias out of it, the one thing that I always say about Iowa defensive backs, and I know he couldn't do it at the combine, so we'll see what happens at the pro day if the doctors clear him and he's fully 100% healthy at the pro day, is I want to see what his 40 is, because that determines a lot about Iowa defensive backs. The thing about Iowa's defense is it's zone heavy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that these guys come into a press man scheme, they fail. And you take a look at guys like Josh Jackson, and I was looking through a number of names earlier, like Amari Spivey and guys like Greg Maben, that Micah Hyde. They were tremendous players at Iowa. They had tremendous ability. They ran their 40s 4.5, 4.55, 4.6, 4, and then when they got on the field, you could see that their ability couldn't translate into what they were doing on the field. Cooper, I have a feeling, is a little bit different, and not much, but a little bit different. I was really surprised because, you know, Jacob took like 4 hours just to get onto the recording today, so I decided to take another look at Cooper while I was waiting. I was really surprised that in a lot of the games that they had him lined up in press man. So, and he was doing better in the press man than he was doing in the zone. And I really like that, looking at that at the Packers' new scheme. Now, again, I want to see what his 40 is to go with it, because for some reason at Iowa, the Parker brothers have always been able to mask horrible speed with their schemes. So if he can come out and run like Riley Moss did last year, a 4.45 or something similar, I would be a little bit more optimistic about his ability to play cornerback in the league. But if he comes out and runs like a Micah did or a Josh Jackson or whatever, where it's in the mid 4.5s or whatever, then I'm more inclined to lean with what Jacob said and move him more to safety than play corner. But I think he could do both, and I think he could do both well, depending on the scheme. And I think right now with what the Packers are doing, I think he could do both with the Packers, whether it be inside as a nickel or on the boundary, or just, hey, we're not even going to mess with it unless we have an injury, so we're just going to throw you back at safety with McKinney, and that's what your position is from this day forward. Again, I don't know what he measured out. Obviously, I don't think he did any kind of measurements at the combine.
No, we don't have anything on him.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I think Iowa had him listed at like 6 foot.
6 foot 203.
Okay, so he's at least an inch and a half shorter.
Yeah, and let's see if I can pull it up real quick. He does have the age for him. He is only 21 right now. I think he'll be 22 this year. So that's another thing the Packers tend to. So according to his NFL profile, he measures at 6'1.5", 203 pounds. So that kind of fits perfectly with, the average of a cornerback in the NFL. I love the kid. Obviously, he's got the Iowa thing going for him. For me, I know that's I try to leave my bias out of it. And I had this conversation on the Elon machine with another guy too, that I try to let everybody else bring up the guys and then I will talk about them. I don't try to always bring these guys up because then they can just say, oh, well, you're a Hawkeye fan, whatever.
Yeah, well, you're a Hawkeye fan, whatever.
So,
you asked me to do that.
I know. You just wait until you get your Michigan jokes on there, and I'll. No. So yeah, Cooper, I think could succeed either way. I like you said, Jacob. I don't know if he's going to be there at 25. I think a lot of it's going to depend, again, like I said, what he runs at the for the 40. If he runs the 40, I don't know if he's going to do the full thing at the pro day. So he might just let the tape speak for itself. And I think one way or the other, whoever gets him is going to have a great player. If the Packers get him, I will probably buy my third jersey in 2 years.
Who are the other two?
I bought Van Ness. I had that one specifically made.
Mm-hmm.
And then I bought Aaron Jones last year because I found one that fit me at the pro shop when I was up there.
So you're the one who got him.
I am. I was just thinking about this the other day, that outside of Van Ness, the last 2 jerseys I bought, the player wasn't there the next year. So
I got a Josh Jackson jersey in 2018.
I got one of those too. Mine was the sewn on. It was a 25% off order. So 25% off. I got like the sewn on warrant, like the one that's behind me here. Similar to that, or over here, I guess is what it would be. But yeah, it was not one of my finer purchases.
You should have asked me. I told if you would have known me at the time, I would have told everything about
I didn't. My life was much better at that point, but
probably. And Joey probably wasn't even alive at that point. So I mean,
I really wanted a Josh Jackson jersey because in November of 2017, it was after the Packers lost to the Panthers and they were fully eliminated from the playoffs because Richard Rodgers did something dumb on an onside kick. I predicted that they draft Josh Jackson, and then it happened, and I was very excited. Looking back at it, I would love to talk about Josh Jackson if we weren't at the 48-minute mark. But yeah, he led the Big Ten in interceptions for 1 year, which was cool. But he just got away with a lot of contact, and that showed up eventually.
And like I said, the Hawkeyes run a zone-heavy defense.
Yeah.
And the Packers weren't running a zone-heavy. Kawano and I have both said that had he been drafted while Barry was there, he probably would have had a little bit more success than what he had previously. But like you said, we're getting a little off topic, so let's get back to it. I'm going to mention somebody on mine that most likely isn't. He's probably not going to be there, but I keep seeing this name thrown up there as somebody who would be the perfect fit for what the Packers are running right now, and that's Terry and Arnold out of Alabama.
Oh my God.
I've seen everybody and their little brother saying, oh, well, they just need to trade up for him. They just need to trade up for him. Sure. I mean, he's got a lot of things there. He's average for what a corner is in the league. He had a good RAS score. He's probably a better man coverage than a zone coverage guy. I just wish he was a little bit more physical off the line. That's kind of what we see with Jair, where that we love that. And I said this earlier, I call it the dog in him. It's the punch that they give or the fight that they give off that line. I wish they would take a little bit more of the 5-yard give me than what they do. Usually with him, it was just the real quick jab and then he was gone. So that's a little bit. I did think his hips were a little bit stiff when you would see him backpedal and then try to do his hip turn. It looked like he stumbled a lot out of it, and all the tape that I watched. So it just seemed like his hips were a little stiff, and that he couldn't make that adjustment there. He did look like he had decent awareness, and he was able to track the ball well. And I thought, again, what we like out of these guys so far is their tackling ability. I thought he was a willing tackler, and he had the capability of doing that. I don't know where the guy's going to go. I know people are all. I think it was Matt Miller came out and tweeted something about, this guy would be the perfect guy for the Packers defense, and he just reads Green Bay Packer all over him. Are they going to have to trade up for him? Are they going to be able to stay put? I don't know, but I tend to think that he probably would be solid for the Packers if he were to be there at 25. Now tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I won't.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, of the Alabama corners, I like him better. I think I feel like sometimes the basis for some analysis is like whether or not the guy has a cool name. So the fact that McKinstry has the name Kool-Aid, people are like, oh, that would be awesome. Have a guy named Kool-Aid. It's like, yeah, he's good. I'm not trying to say McKinstry's not good. It's just we're talking about tackling. Like, this guy's not that much of a willing tackler. And
people hang on to the smallest things. Just remember ha back in the day that, that's all people wanted was ha because of the ha Clinton Dix and shit. So
I do very much appreciate the ability that I had to use the Joker ha gifs and clips and all that stuff anytime he did something. So, but yeah, I won't tell you, Arnold's awesome. If the Packers could get him, he'd be great.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you. I'll also say his combine interview, this is irrelevant to his play. But if teams, depending on how much teams in the top 24 weigh combine interviews and how they do in those one-on-one meetings, Terrion Arnold should be a top 10 pick if that's like their main basis they go off of, because he is an impressive human being, at least from the way he speaks. He had some incredible stories and incredible analogies for the way he plays. So that's my 2 cents on him, and I agree with a lot of what you guys said. He plays like I just think on an island and can be a lockdown corner in the NFL.
Right. Now, there's one thing, and I want to ask you guys, because you guys probably know a little bit better than I do. Like I say, I never claim to be an expert on anything, but it just seems, yeah, I know. It's kind of shocking that I don't claim that, but I've seen it a lot with more and more the last few years than anything, but it's that whole side straddle that they do, where instead of lining up face to face to their receiver, they're more face off to the side. And then I see more and more guys get out of place because of that. Is that something that they're teaching these guys that they need to learn, or is that just something I don't know?
I would imagine they're trying to push that player toward like help coverage in some cases, or if a guy's one-on-one with him, you want to push him to the sideline because then you kind of just ride him out of bounds.
Yeah, but I just see more and more guys, and that was something I was seeing with him a little bit, and that's why I said the hip thing he seemed a little bit stiff, because when he would do that, he would have a hard time getting back to a position to play the wide receiver. And that's kind of the same thing that I've seen with some of the other guys on here. And then Cooper, to kind of go back to him a little bit, he would get disengaged from that receiver when he would do that. But yeah, when he would play him face to face, he was on that guy like glue. So I don't know what's going on with that. So yeah, like I said, it just doesn't make sense in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, with Cooper specific, like I believe what you're talking about. Like I saw him do that on a few plays, but it almost seemed like he had the backpedal ability at least to like stay in track with him. But that's an interesting point because I definitely have noticed that too.
So, all right. So, other than my musings, what do we got next? Who's Jacob? You want to go next with who you got? Give me a surprise one. Give me a deep dive.
Oh, a deep dive. I don't know if.
Dive.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't
talking
know.
like Ted Thompson deep dive.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got anybody quite like that, but a name that's kind of surfaced a little more recently is Jerry Jones, the cornerback out of Florida State, nickel corner. The people that Jacob Morley said this to me last week. If you want to poke holes in Malik Neighbors' tape, him going up against Jerry Jones in the slot is one of those spots where you could kind of be like, oh, he struggles with this. He struggles with those kinds of things. Like, I think Florida State, and I still believe this. I think Florida State got jobbed in not being able to play in the playoff. But I mean, that's a different topic for another day. But they had a really good defense. That is a really good group that they have. Jared Verse is one of my favorite players in this entire draft. He was on that defense, and Jones is another one of their players. He was one of their best players as their nickel corner. He was absolutely locked down in the slot as a nickel corner. And I think that, again, if the Packers are looking to fortify that position long term, and they had him on a top 30 visit. So, like, again, some of the guys that they've brought in have been players that they're looking for as potential replacements, competition, whatever you want to call it, for that nickel spot. Or maybe they see him as the other safety. And Gutekunst did have that quip before about how he thinks that the nickel and the safety positions can be interchangeable. And maybe that is true. But that remains to be seen on how he does that. But I think he's really good as far as a potential nickel prospect. Could he play some safety if they asked him to do that? Maybe. But I am, like I mentioned, I think Keyshawn is better than the way that goes. I don't want to say a relationship with him. It's not like we text or anything like that, but I've gotten to talk to him a few times. He's a pretty cool guy. He's nice to me. He's been good to me anytime I've asked. So
I met him one time last year and he was a great guy.
I want him to do well for those reasons, among many others. And I do think he was better than, like I said, the PFF numbers are not great, but I think he was better than that. And, you know, if the Packers are willing to give him that kind of contract, I would think that Jeff Hafley is involved in conversations like that of saying, Gutekunst is going to tell him, hey, I want to give this guy a contract to not only be our kick returner, but can you use him as a slot corner? If Hafley says yes, then I feel like they have at least some type of plan in that spot. So I'm interested to see how – I think that's the most fun part of this draft, going all the way back to the beginning, is just what is their vision now – because with Barry, you kind of knew the deal. You wanted those zone corners that can kind of rally and tackle. You want two really good linebackers and big ass pass rushers like Lucas Van Ness and Rashawn Gary to just kind of play that way. And I think that's still going to be the plan. Gutekunst said he doesn't want to get smaller. So sorry to the people that want Chop Robinson or something like that. I don't know if that's the route they're going to go.
Unless they view him as like a Sam Backer or something.
Yeah, maybe they could do something.
Go back to the Edge episode that Kawano and I made a few weeks ago.
I try not to listen when Kawano talks, but
now you know my daily life.
You of all people can understand that. Yeah, but I just think that Green Bay could – I'm interested to see how they put these things together and what they think they're going to do. And then, you know, the cool part will be once we decide as a Twitter society how they're going to use player X, Y, and Z, they'll have something completely different for us when camp opens in August.
So – I this is another guy that I took a look at too, because if I remember right, they had both the corners from FSU in for a top 30 visit. I think they also brought in Renardo Green. So I did take a look at him. You know, I thought he was physical. Again, I have wrote down here he's got some dog to him, and I even spelled it the kid way DAWG. So I mean, I am hip. Until I just said that there. But I did think that he got caught staring into the backfield a little bit. And it caused him to lose track of the wide receiver. Now, I don't know if that was because they were playing zone and he was hoping for that safety help or whatever. Again, he had that weird thing where when he was, I call it the side straddle, but when he was side running and then he went to flip, looked like he was stiff in it. It wasn't a natural motion for him. He's not afraid to tackle, but I thought that he could use a little bit of work on his technique because he tended to just use arm instead of full force into it. But that could just be the old school part of me coming out where I think he just needs to take the guy's head off instead of patty cake playing. So,
Oh man,
I really think, and then, you know, it goes back to they had, and Jacob said that defense was really, you know, something else because they have the two corners, verse. They had all those guys down
Think
there.
about the ACC title game. They're playing with like a 9th string quarterback because Jordan Travis is broken, and the guy that replaced him ended up concussed. They basically had to win that game on defense, and then they did. They did. That is incredible. Yeah. I always think like the margin for error on defenses like that is so small. We've seen it work in reverse in Green Bay, right? Like, you've heard defenders talk about like, hey, we know if we hold them to 24 or less, we got number 12, or in now's case, number 10. Like, don't love that mentality.
Nope.
Versus like after the Raiders game this year, Jair Alexander said something along the lines of like, I guess we can't give up any touchdowns. Jair said it in such a way that it didn't sound great when he said it, but like his thought was like the mentality was we need to be able to hold them to, 0. The goal for, in my opinion, when I was coaching defense, I always said if they score, take it personal. It was like we should be able to stop them. But obviously the NFL is a little bit different. But I feel like the mentality on defense, even if it's not realistic, is what's that line from D3, the Mighty Ducks? Like if you're hunting goose eggs, you got to start early. Well, the Packers got to be starting early and stuff.
You got to clear out the trash.
Yeah,
clear out the trash.
Joey, that movie was made before you were born. I'm not even joking. That's not a joke. That's a real one.
I know it is. I know it fully.
Shout out Janelle Mackey. Mighty Ducks reference.
And it didn't even come out in the theaters. That was a Saturday night movie showing that they released on VHS that same year.
I didn't know that.
What is this Saturday night movie showing?
So once upon a time, Joey, before Prime and Netflix and all this sort of stuff, you would get some movies were like straight to VHS, which was the tape that you put into the thing, and it plays the movie.
Okay,
there was that. But the Saturday night movie release was, so in D3's case, it's a Disney movie. So on Saturday at 7 o'clock, you would wait, and then you would go to your TV, and that was the only time that you could see it. And then eventually it became a VHS after that. But it was a Saturday night movie.
Okay.
And if you want to really get old with this, it was also a consolation prize on several of Disney game shows, like Legends of the Hidden, or not Disney, Nickelodeon game shows like Legends of the Hidden Temple and stuff like that. So can you think about that, where you just lost to this other team, and the announcer's like, and you get a home video of Mighty Ducks 3.
Oh my God. That you learn something new every day. That's an incredible history lesson right there. My experience with like Disney Channel originals is like my Disney Channel original movies were High School or High School Musical and Teen Beach Movie.
Okay, we gotta. All right, so
anything else? Can we please talk about anything else?
Jerry and Jones, Joey, your thoughts on Jerry and Jones?
Sure, I can't say I've watched enough on Jerry and Jones to give enough of a consistency on him, but I will talk about. I don't have too many deep cuts, but I do think we need to talk about Nate Wiggins, the guy from Clemson, a little bit. I think back to Packers Twitter and their reaction. I think they would. The immediate reaction would be we just drafted Eric Stokes again because this guy is really fast. But he's a lot more than that, and I think he's a different player than Eric Stokes. He did run a 4.29 40. He does have great closing speed, and I do think my main thing with him, I think he would be he plays boundary, but I just think he could cover guys really well over the middle of the field, which has been a big problem for Green Bay forever. One of my brother's favorite sayings during Packers games. Every time there's a pass over the middle of the field, he says something like the middle has been open in Green Bay since Lombardi left, which feels true. And so, that's obviously a linebacker problem, which they'll have to address over this offseason as well. But I think Wiggins, with his speed, is just able to cover guys really well over the middle field, track those routes really well. My other notes on him, just fluid hips, really good athlete, obviously, 9.42 RAS, kind of undersized at 173 and 6'1". 6'1" is fine. 173 is less than ideal at corner. But I do think he definitely is in that same mix of DeJean as kind of Packers fit, and definitely also fit for Jeff Hafley's defense as well.
You just said it. The biggest knock on him is that size, that 173 pounds. A guy that I used to know in a chat forum years ago, and I don't want to get into the history on that one, Joey, so you're just going to have to roll with me on that one.
Oh, God. Okay.
There's
I found out the other day there was Clay Matthews had a Facebook group called like White Nation with Brian Cushing in 2009. Was it is it along the lines of that, or is it just some like rivals chat forum going on?
It was kind of like Reddit, but a little less technical.
Organized.
Organized. And it just, sites would have, the one that I use specifically, it's defunct now, was it had articles on the front, and then you had a separate thing for a forum, and it had forums broken down into all the different sports and all the different teams and everything. And you would just go in there with your username and have chats like you would like you do now with Reddit, but it just, they were a little bit more clustered. So
you chatted with Nate Wiggins, or
No, there was a guy that I knew years ago on this forum that would call, the word that he used for guys like that was ballerina, because they were tall and really small.
Gotcha. Okay.
And he used it famously for Jared Abbrederis, and ever since then it made tons of sense, because they were built like a ballerina. They were tall, really thin type guys, and if he can, the big worry is if he's going to be able to hold up in the NFL, or is he going to be able to put on any kind of poundage and not lose that athletic ability?
Yeah.
Don't know. So it's going to take, if the Packers have him on the draft board, which I'm assuming they would anyway, they're going to okay the pick. They're going to have to be okay with one or the other thing, that he's either going to be able to handle the payload at his current weight, or he's going to be able to keep his athleticism and still pack on some pounds. So, but yeah, everything you said really works with him. Really, he would probably be another Stokes in a way, hopefully without the injuries and all that other stuff. But yeah, I could see it.
Yeah, I mean, the weight thing is obviously just kind of the same with Rake's Raw. It's different with Ennis, just because he plays in the nickel, which obviously, as Jacob was on earlier, different responsibilities. But you can get by with it in college and still be an elite player just because you're more athletic than everybody else on the field. But in the NFL, everybody is the top of the talent and much bigger, much taller, and that is obviously would be much more of a problem. And yeah, I mean, maybe he would still be able to get by with just his raw traits in the NFL and not have to pack on 10, 15 pounds as soon as his rookie year. But it's definitely a question mark, and definitely something that needs to be considered with him.
Something else they could do last year, like Jaden Reed was about 5 pounds lighter than what they would have preferred, and they asked him to add weight, and he said he did that. So maybe that's something they could do with Wiggins, but it's a fine line, right? Because his biggest asset is his speed. I don't know about you guys, but I get slower when I add 10 pounds, and I'm not very fast to begin with. So, asking him to
run.
do that. Yeah. Understood.
But I go back to the AJ Hawk thing, where AJ Hawk was a beast in college, but then he thought that he was going to have to add weight to play in the NFL, and he did, and he didn't add. It didn't work for him. it slowed him
Now,
down.
to be fair, AJ Hawk did go to a poverty university.
Well, yeah, you know,
I was waiting for that comment.
Substandard football program.
So, you know, it depends. And didn't they say the same thing about Amari Rodgers too, that he really packed on the pounds to try playing in the NFL?
I think Amari Rodgers was just bad.
So
Yeah, but I mean, didn't they
I
say
was going
he
to say I'm
packed
going
on
to
like
take everyone on
15
Amari Rodgers.
Well, yeah, but didn't they say he packed on like 15 or 20
yes,
pounds?
he did, because they were talking about his weight for I think it was his rookie season. They were worried about something like that. And then he lost some weight to try and gain explosiveness, which he never had.
Right.
And then now he's returning punts for
Birmingham, isn't it?
Birmingham. Jay Sternberger's
Birmingham
team, I think, right?
Yeah.
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 Yep.
Jace is there. Amari Rodgers. They got a couple former Packers.
There's a lot of
They do.
former Packers in the UFL period. I saw Manny Wilkins was listed on one team. I can't remember where it is. So
He's on the St. Louis Battlehawks, so I'm covering. He's their backup quarterback.
yeah, so and I knew he was everybody's preseason darling there for a while too. But anyway, my deep dive, I'm kind of torn on two of them. I'll go with this one because why not go back to the well? And that's Andrew Phillips out of Kentucky. He has okay size. I think he's about the same size as either Jair or Carrington, which they're both similar in size anyway. Had a decent 40. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. I think it was like a 4.45. Riveting audio right here.
4.48.
Yeah, there you go. He's another one that I really thought had an attitude with him when he played. He didn't shy away from tackling, but I think his smaller size kind of hindered him in some of the ability there. His back pedal and his hip flip looked smooth. When he lined up face-to-face, coverage is great. But then again, with the whole side saddle thing, he seemed to lose contact with the receiver, and that's where it kind of hurt him a little bit more. But again, you know, he's got familiarity with Carrington. Carrington came in and had a better year than what a lot of people was going to expect out of him last year. So they're coming from the same situation. More of a press guy, so he could possibly fit into the Hafley system. Maybe he's going to be another 7th round diamond in the rough. Maybe. I don't usually typically give round grades to guys, so I don't know on that, but I did like what I saw out of him.
I feel like he would almost I forgot he's talking about Josh Jackson. I feel like he'd be very good in Joe Barry's system with his tackling. Like he doesn't have great closing speed, but like he can make tackles, which was kind of lacking from Joe Barry's defense. But yeah, I mean, like I do agree with you as far as like press man stuff, which makes him more of a fit for Hafley. I mean, what did he weigh in at the combine? 5'11", 190. So yeah, not the worst. But yeah, I mean, I think overall it'll be interesting just to kind of see with how the Packers want to use the draft capital. You know, you're sitting pretty good at 25 and 41 already, and then you got 58 and then 2 in the 3rd round as well. So I really think, you know, unless they really like Cooper DeJean, Terry Arnold will want to move up from him. I think they're going to stay put with 25 and 41, but they could make a move up. And, you know, they just have so many, you know, the roster is obviously not perfect, but it's not like past years where it's like just such a glaring need. And so I think specifically what my point is here, the flexibility that pick 41 gives them at 25. And 41 might be too early for Phillips specifically.
Oh yeah,
but
definitely. He's mid to late round. I do know that much.
Okay.
He's not going to be 1st or 2nd unless for some reason they're absolutely in love with him and they do a Josiah DeGuara on him and take him 4 rounds earlier than what he should have. No, he's more of a
Okay.
mid to late round. No, this isn't a first or second round type guy, but he's
Gotcha.
my deep dive.
Okay.
My deep dive.
Okay.
I didn't expect either of you know anything about him.
Like, I guess even with him being like just they have some flexibility, and if the board doesn't fall their way early on, then you look at those guys rounds 3 through 6 for them to get their hands on.
What do you think, Jacob?
I don't think I could say anything that you guys have not already said. So he'd have. I tell you what, if they wanted him, they have a hell of a source inside the organization, like you said with Carrington Valentine, who is, I mean, his training camp is one of the best ones I've ever seen. So, I mean, that doesn't mean he's going to be a star or nothing like that, but he made a play today. I'm kind of excited to see how. I'm not counting on Valentine if I'm Brian Gutekunst, but I am excited to see like what he could be.
Well, and that's what I said earlier. He played beyond what anybody thought he was going to as a 7th round rookie. So, and I know, was it Kuiper said that the Packers probably got the steal of the draft in him because he had the ability, but because his numbers weren't where a first rounder should be, is the reason why he fell so far. So it's again taking a flyer on a guy that maybe could do something. And that's what I was saying with the other guy that I had was, and I couldn't find too much on him, so it was really hard to watch, was Jarvis Brownlee out of Louisville. And he's another one that I felt was similar to Jair, that, they had a similar style to him, which makes sense being that, they're both Louisville guys or Louisville. So it just, and I'll be honest, what I've been doing with our draft preview is I go over to Raz.football and I take a look at all the guys that have the high Raz, and that's the only film that I watch. The only film that I watch, because the Packers, even though Goody keeps saying that they don't follow Raz, they must be doing something with Raz because 90% of their picks have green Raz scores.
I think Ross Uglum asked Gutekunst about this a few years ago with Combine, and I can't remember Gutekunst's exact answer, but I think like the thing is, like, even if they're not, like, I really doubt them or any other NFL team is looking at Kent Plate's Twitter account tweeting those out. But I think with the Packers specifically, like, they do like athletic guys, and they can see that in the numbers. And even if they're not using the exact RAS, they like it shows up and it translates.
Well, I think Goody said that they don't use Raz, but they have their own version of it.
He didn't say that. He was basically asked, like Joey said, and Gutekunst just kind of looked at him like, "No, I don't know what that is." Like, but clearly they value athleticism and have since 1992, whenever Ron 91, whenever Ron Wolf took over. That's something, because they had that one year where they drafted Terrell Buckley, and that is like the basis for their never draft short corners stuff that they do now.
Which leads to the Michigan guy.
Yeah, which, hey man, I'm telling you to break the rules. Brian, if you're listening, and I know you are, I'm telling you to break the rules. If you want the best nickel corner in this draft class, it's Mike Sainristil. Former receiver, ball skills through the roof. He would have been Iowa's 3rd leading receiver based on his interception yardage alone.
No, he wouldn't have, because he still would have had Deacon Hill throwing to him, and the guy couldn't hit a barn with a friggin' cow.
I'm just saying the 280 some odd yards or whatever that Sainristil had on his interception yards this year would have been 3rd on Iowa's offense. So shout out to Deacon Hill for having an elite name. Unfortunately, not an elite quarterback. But Mikey Sainristil, man, you want physicality. He's smaller. I know that. You want a guy who's going to play. He might have been Michigan's most physical run defender on a defense that was one of the best in the country. Obviously slowed down Michael Penix and Roma Dunze and Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk and all these guys that everybody loves from that Washington offense. Slowed down Ohio State. with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Egbuka and Julian Fleming and all these guys they had too. Sainristil was a big part of that. And I think he's a guy you could plug in as that nickel corner. If he missed a tackle last season, I don't remember seeing it. Can get beaten coverage a little bit. I don't know that you want him playing like straight man-to-man coverage with everybody. But when it was time to make a play for that defense, and they made a lot of them in 2023, Mikey was usually the one who made that play more often than not. He was defensive MVP of the Big Ten title game. He had at least one forced fumble in that game. It might have been two, but I know one for sure. But yeah, really good player, high character guy, was a captain, which I know the Packers care about. They've talked about that before and other people that they've drafted. And like I said, the former receiver background, so the ball skills are certainly there as well, which is something really the Packers don't have. They had two interceptions.
Surprising.
Their NFL their leader in interceptions last season had two. It was Rudy Ford. It was two. Rasul Douglas was their second, tied for second on the team in interceptions. He didn't play for the team from October onward or from November onward. So they need to have more playmaking on that back end as well. And they need to catch more passes and get some more passes thrown to them. And Sainristil, I think, can help them.
I'll be honest with Sainristil. I started watching a little bit on him. I wasn't liking, I can't remember which game it was. I wasn't liking quite what I saw, but I didn't get to finish out the tape. So I can't really give you my good opinion on him. There was a few things that I saw that I was like, nah, and then somebody showed up and I was like, damn it, I got to get back to work. And I didn't get back to the tape. So
I'm kind of the same boat as you, Joe. I mean, like, the physicality definitely stands out. I know the one clip that everybody was sharing on Twitter was the play against Ohio State where he just lights up Travion Henderson. So I know many Packers fans will like that. Definitely can play nickel.
And I promise we will smash. So yeah. Again, I know he's smaller. That's the
Whoa.
He's small. I get it. I just don't care. And as I joke with my buddy at Notions of Jacob on Twitter, I always say whenever he's like talking about a draft prospect and they come from Michigan, I say, and most importantly, I love him. So that's what matters most. You talk about Blake Corum, you talk about Chris Jenkins, you talk about Mike Sainristil, you talk about any of these guys, I will make the joke. Most importantly, the thing the Packers should follow when they talk about who they're drafting for this draft class, whether or not I love them. And I love Mike Sainristil.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. So we're getting a little bit long. Is there anybody else that you guys really have on your mind that would fit the Green Bay Packers that we haven't talked about as of yet?
I don't want to go like too deep on that, but one guy that like they could make a big move up for is Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo. Highest graded corner in man and like he's the only corner with like a grade above 75 in man and zone situations, which obviously the Packers could value that. So I don't know if they would do that or not, but that's somebody I feel like he was a popular name early in the process amongst the fans.
Lambo,
and then
shout out.
Right. And then as the process has gone on, it's almost like we're all kind of resigned to the fact that he's probably not going to be available at 25.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of like, forget it. You know what I mean? That kind of happened a few years ago with 10 years ago with Clinton Dix. And then it was, Clinton Dix isn't going to be there at 21. And lo and behold, he was. And the Packers took him and he was fine. But yeah, I don't want to go through their cornerback episode without talking about Quinyon Mitchell. He's really good. And the Packers I think that would be like a situation where if he's available, they might sprint the car to the podium and pull a hamstring.
Definitely. And he would probably pull a hamstring walking out onto the stage to accept the jersey.
Yeah, I really like Mitchell. I mean, two names I want to throw out there too, just because I know they're popular names amongst Packers fans on Twitter. Elijah Jones from Boston College. I think a lot of it is the fact that he played with Jeff Heffley as his head coach, of course, but also just a very physical man corner, kind of undersized, if I recall correctly.
I
but
wrote down
basically guy. Yeah, day three guy that I mean, like you were talking about, could take a flyer on if Jeff Halfley likes him enough. And also Max Melton from Rutgers, obviously Bo Melton's brother, um, has some impressive speed. I almost worry if it's kind of the same story of Josh Jackson, where he's a little too physical and would get flagged for it more often than NFL. But two names to watch for, no doubt.
Yeah, I keep saying that the one thing about Max is I would love to see the camp battles between him and Bo,
Oh,
just because I think
sure.
they would play off each other in a. You already saw it a little bit on Twitter where you know Bo was like, "Well, you thought I was fast. Wait until you see Max and shit like that." So those camp battles would be terrific. I did write down Elijah Jones too because of the same thing. Halfley, if he's there in a spot where the Packers can take him late and the Packers don't take him, you have to wonder if Halfley wasn't a fan of his.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I found it interesting. Somebody when I think it was when I posted like the video of Jones at the combine talking about Halfley, like somebody that like follows Boston College, at least that's what it looked like on their profile, said like is that it was ironic considering what he had seen or heard about Jones' relationship with Halfley in the past, but that's very take that with a big grain of salt because I didn't look
right.
too much into that.
Right. I'll say this about Max Melton too, since we talked about him. Somebody who I don't want to say they would know. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But somebody who has some info said to me, write it in erasable pen or something like that, that they're going to take him on the second day of the draft. So
Wow.
I don't know what that means. That could be nonsense. Like
That
he
the
said,
NFL is scripted and
he
he got an early leak.
could be said this to me a while ago. So, but somebody who, I mean, it wasn't the trust me bro sources, but, and it's not, I don't even know that I would call this like sourced info, but it's somebody who might know third party information, if you will.
I think they've had some of those over the years too. Because if you remember right, it kind of happened with Haha, where it got leaked that he was wearing the Packers shirt that he got from like Eddie Lacy or something, and
Oh, no,
everybody's
I
like,
don't
"Oh,
remember that, but I believe
yeah."
you, but I
There
don't
was a
remember
shirt of him in college, or a picture of him in college that he was wearing a Green Bay Packer T-shirt.
that. Huh.
And
There you go.
so everybody was like, "Oh, well, he's going to be taken by the Packers." Well, it was obvious that he was friends with Eddie Lacy, and Eddie Lacy had already been with the Packers, so he ended up getting the shirt from him or whatever. But the Packers always tend to have something like that where the rumor floats out that, well, if this guy's there, he's theirs. And I think it's happened a few different times. I think it happened with Amari. The same thing happened with Amari
Yep.
Rodgers. I know we
They
don't.
moved up for him.
Yeah, and the big talk before the draft was that he wanted to play for the Packers and Aaron Rodgers and all that. But Jacob, is there
Yeah.
anybody else that last minute here that we haven't talked about? That the only one I have left is Cam Hart out of Notre Dame, and I thought he would be a pretty good pickup for the Packers, maybe mid rounds.
Yeah, I don't have anything at the moment. Cam Hart's one. Yeah, like you said, he could be a guy who I've heard some people think he could play safety for them. So
Yeah.
that'll be interesting to look at that. But yeah, another cornerback prospect that certainly fits what the Packers are looking for. I think if there's anything else that we've gathered is they need help in a lot of spots. So
For sure. So give you guys a minute to each tell, what's going on in your circles and where they can find you and all that stuff. So take her away.
I'll go ahead. So yeah, me and Jacob both cover the Packers for Packers Central, along with Bill Huber. I go to Mizzou, so I cover Mizzou football and basketball for Mizzou Central, and then now I just started covering the St. Louis Battlehawks for my buddy MJ Hurley's site at Third Down Thursdays. So you can follow up my work at JoeyBZ_ on Twitter.
And I am also at Packers Central. You can follow me there at Jacob Westendorf. I'm every Tuesday with Jacob Morley and Owen Reese on the Pack-A-Day podcast, which is your draft season crew that we have put together there. And then wherever the wind blows me, man, I'm doing whatever I can this time of year because we're trying to get all that stuff done and taken care of before it's the dead period, which is coming up, and I'm not looking forward to that by any stretch.
For sure.
But it's draft month, so it's time to be happy and healthy.
Yeah, I'm not with Bill Huber over at Packer Central, but you can catch me on the Elon machine at Iowa_Joe86. Mike, even though he's not here, I'll shout out his Twitter at Kawano Mike. You can follow the show at Ohana_Packers. We are still doing the giveaway of the Jair 8x10 when we hit 523 followers on the Ohana Twitter. I think we're at like 290 or something. So we still got a bit of way to go. I did finally see, and Jacob had to leave. So, but I did finally get a hold of the guy for our last drawing. It was sent out. So hopefully he got it. You can find everything or find us on wherever you get your favorite podcast, or just go to ohanapackers.org and you can find us over there. Got a great crew doing some writing over there and some other podcasts that you can follow, like the Mac podcast, and some others may be coming in the future. But as always, guys, next week, what are we talking about next week? I think we are talking about defensive linemen next week. So, and I can't think of who, if that's right or not, but I think it's Sanjay next week talking defensive linemen. So be on the lookout for that one. New episodes every Tuesday. Be sure to like, subscribe, give us, drop us some comments. And as Kawano Mike would say, go Pack Go and aloha.